Forget everything you think you know about self-improvement or personal evolution.
Right.
Today, we're diving into a philosophy so radical. It talks about this massive civilization-level transformation, the end of humanity's, long, complicated adolescence, and the start of our universal adulthood.
And we're not talking about a shift in politics or technology here. This is an internal spiritual reboot of consciousness.
Exactly.
Our sources for this are drawn from the profound and often challenging writings of Tsuru Koji.
Right.
And he lays out this stunning framework for human existence,
Right.
centered entirely on a phenomenon he calls awakening, or kakusei.
Okay, let's unpack this then. This deep dive is our shortcut to really getting Koji's complete philosophical framework. Our mission is to synthesize the key concepts, the powerful metaphors, and, the real-world implications of this human transition.
What has to be shed, what's gained.
And what role you play in what he describes as this universal and totally inevitable shift. We're dealing with ideas that redefine identity itself. So let's start with the big picture. Humanity's metamorphosis. Koji suggests we've been in this developmental phase, a long preparation period, and now that's ending.
Right.
What exactly is the nature of this awakening, this kakusei? What does the adult version of humanity even look like?
Well, Koji defines this as the beginning of humanity's adulthood, or seijin. But crucially, this isn't just about, emotional maturity.
Okay.
It's an existential shift where we finally commence flight into the universe.
Flight into the universe.
It implies that our current state, locked into separation and conflict, is temporary. It's incomplete. We are graduating from the constraints of 3D reality as we perceive it.
That sounds absolutely monumental. I mean, for a transformation of that magnitude, the conceptual shift must be profound.
It is.
Are there analogies that help us grasp how huge this change is?
Yeah, he uses two really beautiful nature-based metaphors.
Okay.
The first is the dragonfly nymph. It spends its early life underwater, totally constrained by that environment. To become the adult dragonfly, it has to shed its entire skin, emerge, and fly.
Yeah.
The second is the cicada nymph, spending years underground in the dark.
In preparation.
Exactly. Only to emerge and transform into the winged insect, finally able to fly and sing.
That makes it feel less like learning a new skill and more like evolving into a whole new species.
That's a good way to put it.
So if we're finally ready to fly, what's been keeping us grounded for so long? What's the inner barrier we have to break through for this kakusei?
The sources are exceptionally clear on this. The barrier is not external. It's not physical.
It's all in our heads.
It is entirely conceptual. The awakening requires humanity to shatter what Koji calls the cage of conceptual frameworks.
The cage.
Yeah, and this cage is tied specifically to the individual self, the gay. It's this rigid structure we've built over eons, defining ourselves through rules and separation.
So the awakening is shedding the conceptual prison.
And a liberation from the bonds of the self.
Okay, this is where the definition of self gets really challenging. If we're meant to achieve this liberation, the sources say we have to remove the armor of the ego. If the ego is armor, what specific parts make it up? And why is it so necessary to take it off to fly?
That armor is everything we rely on to establish our worth, to feel in control.
Like what?
Koji specifically calls out our rigid ideas, the measuring sticks we use to constantly judge ourselves and everyone else.
You mean morality?
Moral concepts like rightness and justice, and rigid religious or philosophical notions like it must be this way or this is what a good person should be doing.
But those ideas, justice ideals, that's what we're taught is the foundation of a stable society, a stable self.
Of course.
If those crumble, that sounds intensely destabilizing.
It is. The sources describe this process as creating a world of intense discomfort. In Japanese, he calls it itadamarene.
Tadamarene. What does that discomfort actually look like in daily life?
Well, imagine your entire self-worth is tied to the idea that you are a righteous, moral person. You know the proper way to live.
Okay.
When this universal shift starts, and those rigid moral measuring sticks lose their power, your ability to judge others, and more importantly, your ability to define yourself as good, it just crumbles.
So the world feels wrong, unpredictable.
And you feel utterly lost. Like you don't know who you even are without those moral definitions, that feeling of complete uncomfortable displacement. That's the Adamarene.
So the goal isn't to find a new, better set of rules. It's to get to a state where the whole struggle between good and evil just disappears.
Exactly. The definitive marker of awakening is when that internal conflict of duality Nikyokusei completely vanishes.
And when that happens?
The newly awakened person gains what he calls the double consciousness.
The double consciousness.
Yes, it's the realization that the whole is the self, and the self is part of the whole.
So you see yourself as both, the individual and everything at the same time.
Simultaneously, yes, without conflict. This is described as a return to the original self. Sometimes he even calls it, startlingly, the return to the alien.
Wow. Okay, let's get to the core definition then. The definition of the ego itself seems so simple, but it challenges every assumption we have. What is the ego? The jiga, according to these writings.
It's not a separate entity. It's not, some innate corruption. It's defined purely as memory.
Memory.
The ego isn't a solid, fixed identity. It's just conceptual memory, shinjoteki kyuku, and information that's been gathered over time.
It's information. But if it's just memory, why does it feel so essential, so visceral? Why does losing my identity feel like dying?
Because that memory includes all the concepts we cherish.
Yeah.
Our ideals, our goals, our ideas of rightness, the whole complex belief system we use to define who I am.
Okay.
And the really painful insight Koichi offers is that all this identity-forming memory is ultimately just misconception and misunderstanding.
Misconception.
Omoe komi to kanchigai, as he puts it.
That's the core of it, the entire structure of who you thought you were, your moral code, your achievements, is just based on accumulated misunderstanding. That is profound.
And you have to realize that to awaken, he uses a fantastic metaphor for it, the balloon metaphor.
Right. Tell me about that.
He describes universal consciousness as a large, unbounded mass of air, like the air in a giant open balloon.
Okay, one hole.
The ego is the moment when a single section of that air is twisted and tied off, creating a bounded, contained space.
And that's me.
That's the separate self. This artificial separation is achieved by burying the recognition of infinite time and space deep in the subconscious. The ego believes it's finite.
And if the tie is released, the air just rejoins the whole, so the ego resists being untied because that feels like death.
Precisely. It has this fierce, consuming fear of being untied because it thinks that release means it will cease to exist.
But Koichi points out that it's actually the most efficient path.
Yes. The maximum contribution you can make to humanity and the earth is simply to awaken, to return to universal consciousness by choosing to release these personal, memory-based beliefs. It's the path of least resistance for evolution.
Which brings us to the bigger context. If universal consciousness is already whole, already love, why create this complicated, struggling human experience in the first place? Why tie off all these billions of little balloons?
This is the grand plan. The cosmic game.
Hey.
Humanity took on physical 3D bodies for one reason, to experience imperfection. Fukinsensa. And the sense of lack, getsukukan.
So the 3D world, with all its pain and struggle, was created intentionally to learn about love by experiencing its absence.
That is the explicit purpose, yes. Yeah. Universal consciousness is love, but in a state of totality, it can't fully appreciate its own nature.
It needed contrast.
Exactly. It needed non-love to fully realize and taste its own completeness. Think of air again. You only know how precious air is when you're deprived of it.
So by creating lack, love could be truly experienced, appreciated.
In an entirely new way.
So all of reality, with all its drama and struggle, is basically a sophisticated learning environment for love itself.
It is. Koichi describes this whole reality as a passing of the time, himatsubushi, or a grand, elaborate game, goko asobi, played by the consciousness of love.
And the great shift that's happening now.
Isn't humanity forcing an evolution? It's simply the consciousness of love choosing to change the type of game being played.
What's the new game?
It's shifting from a game of lack and separation to a game of simultaneous consciousness, where the lack and the totality are both recognized as the self at the same time.
And this change is inevitable.
He says it is. The decision rests with the universal consciousness, not us. It's happening regardless.
Okay, so if the ego is just memory and misconception and fear is the only barrier, how do you actually do it? Is it years of meditation?
Surprisingly, no. The sources say the release is simply a matter of choice, a selection problem. A choice to let go of your memory, your ego structure. It doesn't require time. It doesn't require delay. Because it's just memory, the choice to release it can be made now, in this moment.
But most people don't just choose to abandon their identity. Even if it's causing them pain, what happens to those who resist untying the balloon?
For those who resist, who get the concept intellectually but fear the choice, the process becomes externally enforced.
What do you mean enforced?
Koji observes that people seeking awakening who still cling to their ego often experience intense, seemingly random suffering.
Like, bad things just start happening to them.
They're thrown into misfortune, things are done to them, their lives just seem to fall apart.
And that's not random.
No. That happens because the ego is fighting back. And that resistance has to be completely exhausted before it will surrender. The universe isn't punishing them.
It's just removing the scaffolding the ego relies on.
Exactly. That intense discomfort is the ego structure being forcefully unraveled until it has nothing left to hold on to and it's forced to let go.
So if you're listening and you feel that deep, chronic ache of dissatisfaction, is there a simple test for that?
There is. Any lingering feeling of dissatisfaction or the thought that something is still missing in your reality.
A job, a partner, a goal?
Anything. It means you are still clinging to a hidden bias, a torpor of the ego, the hidden belief that some external thing will complete you. The discomfort is the signal that your conceptual frameworks are still active.
Okay, finally, let's talk about relationships. Other people. How do we interact during this process? What role do they play in our journey to kakusei?
Koji is very clear. Others are not truly other. They are messengers.
Messengers.
Specifically arranged around you to help you notice your own ego's biases and attachments.
So they're perfectly placed to trigger our deepest insecurities.
Precisely. They serve as the mirror. Your true self, which is light, can't perceive itself without a reflection.
And others are that reflection.
They are that perfect reflection. If someone irritates you, they aren't irritating you randomly. They are showing you the exact bias, the exact hidden moral concept that your ego is still clinging to.
So every person you meet is a messenger.
Showing you something about the state of your own separation. Yes.
Okay.
So, to synthesize this whole framework for you, the path to awakening, to kakusei, is defined by the inevitable collapse of internal duality.
Right.
And the revolutionary realization that the self is fundamentally memory, and that memory is based on misconception.
And it's all just a choice.
A selection problem that you can make in this very moment. To let go of the memory-based self that fears being untied. Any suffering is just the ego exhausting its resistance.
And when that choice is finally made, when that double consciousness emerges, you realize you were just watching a super realistic 3D spectacular drama from a super seat.
A VIP spectator, yeah. Finally free from the concepts of lack. The world changes entirely, but the change is purely internal.
Purely perceptive.
And the sources describe the resulting state as sheer rapture. Kanki. It's not just happiness. It's an ecstatic transformation of perception.
How so?
Streets, buildings, people, even small objects, a simple glass, a plastic straw wrapper, are suddenly seen not as inert things, but as vibrant energies.
Wow.
Infused with the care, the joy, and the intention of the people who created them. All of reality is perceived as flowing with beautiful energy and delight.
That's the ultimate destination, then. A state of overwhelming gratitude for reality just as it is.
And according to Tsuru Koji, that moment is inevitable. It's the end of the game of lack.
So here's the thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. If your perception of the world, the people, the objects, the buildings around you were suddenly transformed into a state of sheer, overwhelming gratitude and delight, what action would you take today, knowing that this state of Kanki is what you're actually moving toward?